Outrun me with that junk car. 5 words spit out like a cigar flicked into the gutter, and suddenly a lifetime hangs in the balance. That's where this story begins, on a sunburnt street between a man who thinks money buys truth and a man who learned a different kind of certainty under the hood of a dirty old car. Change the names, change the places. The sting's the same. Here's Marcus Reed's story. Act 1. Hook. Early afternoon summer heat making the pavement shimmer. Marcus sits in his garage breathing in the smell of oil and old vinyl. The car under the single bulb is a 1971 Pontiac GTO. Faded green paint, a few patches where primer shows leather seats split, but softened by years. To most people walking by, it's a relic, a project, something you'd see on the back of a pickup. To Marcus, it's memory and muscle. His father's hands taught him to listen to engines, taught him to tune a heartbeat into a machine. The GTO is lumpy, imperfect, but underneath the rust is a rebuilt 455 block, forged rods cams Marcus swapped and tuned himself. Quiet pride lives here. Quiet grief, too. His father died without clearing the old shame that followed their family for decades. Marcus kept the car exactly as he was told. Don't explain who you are, let them see. And he liked it that way. Across the street, a late-model hypercar glints like a threat. Elliot Carmichael pulls up the kind of car that announces wealth and entitlement plaque on wheels. Elliot steps out like he owns the sunlight. Tailored polo sunglasses, a smile that's practiced to be charming and lethal at the same time. He circles Marcus's GTO, taps the hood with a manicured finger, and laughs like he's reading the punchline to a joke everyone else is supposed to get. "What are you doing here?" he says loud enough for the block to hear, voice threaded with that special brand of contempt only money can teach. "Outrun me with that junk car. I dare you." Marcus keeps his hands on the wheel, silence his shield. He's been underestimated his whole life. For the color of his skin, for the way his family lived, for the old car they called embarrassing. He's used to people trying to shrink him with a word. But this is different. Elliot doesn't stop at baiting. He ups the ante. "Name the stakes," Marcus says. Elliot grins. "My company," he says. Apex Core, a tech consulting firm, private, worth roughly $195 million. If you win, I sign everything over. You lose, you drop this neighborhood forever. Hands drift toward witnesses, toward stakes that hum with power. This is the moment Marcus feels all the old ghosts. His father's forced dismissal from a country club job decades ago, the way polite people covered quiet cruelties with quiet money. Marcus doesn't shake hands on roadside wagers. He never did. He races to finish things, not to post them. But this time he taps the dash cam. Recording is practical. He remembers what he was taught under wrenches and at racetracks long before anyone noticed the speed without craft is noise. He slides the GTO into the lane, and when the light goes green, the world tilts into a contest that is more than speed. It's history in motion. Act 2. Effort and turning point. Elliot launches with the predictable arrogance of a modern machine's all traction and torque systems that make pilots of amateurs. Marcus lets the GTO breathe, feels the tires find the pavement like a song he knows by heart. The street is a modest 2-mile sprint. A couple of bends that will separate flash from finesse. Marcus remembers apexes, remembers Monaco, remembers being 32 and walking away from a career the press had made into a halo. He had left racing, quietly built a non-profit to teach kids from hard neighborhoods how to drive and how to hold on to discipline. Nobody reading glossy magazines knew that. They saw a man and an old car and made a story to fit that view. The first corner is where the race peels open. Elliot breaks late showboating, trusting his car's electronics. Marcus doesn't break, not really. He sculpts momentum. The GTO leans like a boxer dodging a swing, and Marcus threads the line a professional knows is there, but that amateurs can't see. He clips the apex, lets the big American V8 howl, and the gap starts to close. The next straight opens, and Marcus decides not to chase horsepower, but to outskill it. He treats every shift like a sentence, every downforce as punctuation. and by the time the cars head toward the finishing ramp, Marcus slips past Elliot as if the hypercar were standing still. He wins by a canyon, 14 seconds, and the street feels the shock like a dropped glass. Elliot comes apart in front of everyone. Rage like a fire with no oxygen, humiliation the way people who never had to be humble look at the ground when humility finds them. You cheated, he spits. You had help. That car's modified illegal. This doesn't count. Marcus stays quiet, measuring. The dash cam is kind. It captured Elliot's words, every cocky insistence, the offer, the acceptance, the race. Marcus plays it back, hands the footage to a bystander who happens to be a security officer at the nearby gated club. The officer watches, then looks up and says something Marcus didn't expect. That's not just a car, that's Marcus Reed, the former champ. It's the recognition that turns the problem from a roadside spat into something else entirely. Elliot's first response is the same playbook rich men use when their vanity gets hurt lawyers. A lawsuit shows up before the sun sets. A high-priced firm files claims that paint Marcus as a con, predatory, manipulative, out to bait wealthy men. Money buys words and headlines. Sponsors of Marcus's Driving Institute start to get cold feet. Funders, who had quietly kept the program afloat, begin pulling back, whispering about negative publicity. Marcus sees the Academy's calendar as a roster of young people depending on stability, and he understands the weaponization is intentional, not to win in court, but to suffocate him with cost and time. But that's the turning point. The fight moves from the street to the narrative. Marcus calls in an old friend, a hard-nosed civil attorney who knows how to turn law into scythe. A local journalist picks up a tip from a guard who's tired of seeing the same pattern. Security footage, internal emails, 3 prior incidents where Elliot approached people of color driving modest cars. A pattern begins to form, and with it a different story, not a one-off bet, but systematic intimidation cloaked as casual arrogance. Act 3. Victory and the open end. The truth, when gathered, hits like a tide. The arbitration isn't a circus, it's clinical, with a retired judge who doesn't buy theatrics. Marcus isn't looking to humiliate, he's looking to finish something his father couldn't, to clear a name and to keep the Academy alive. The dashcam plays in a polished room. Witnesses testify that Elliot has used junk as a word of exclusion before that internal emails from his club show a strategy of excluding the wrong kind of people from parking lots and social spaces. The law, in this case, recognizes what the camera shows a clear offer acceptance consideration, a verbal contract performed. Elliot signs the papers, hands over Apex Core like a stunned man passing keys. He files for bankruptcy not long after, losing not just money, but reputation and the social networks he weaponized. Marcus takes the company and retools it, not to enrich himself, but to endow his Reed Driving Institute. He sells minority stakes to ethical investors, seeds a fund that guarantees tuition and equipment for kids from underfunded neighborhoods, and sets up satellite locations so the program lasts beyond any one lifetime. He funds scholarships, hires former students, and turns the insult, junk, into a catalyst for change. But the ending isn't a neat bow. Elliot's defenders argue about jest and hyperbole about whether words shouted in heat mean a binding promise. Some say Marcus got lucky. Others say the law bent to public pressure. The Academy blossoms. Kids who once thought the world had no room for them now find tracks and mentors and jobs, but questions remain about how often power can be checked by footage and community, and how many injustices remain invisible because no camera was rolling. This is Marcus's inner arc, the part the headlines miss: a man who learned to be small so his son could grow. A man who kept his pride in a car that looked broken but ran true. A man who converted humiliation into strategy, who refused to be erased by money and lawyers. He doesn't gloat. He doesn't buy a new garage full of trophies. He keeps the GTO in the same place. Faded paint, familiar dents. Because that car is a ledger of memory, and because the victory he wanted wasn't for himself, but for every kid who's been told they don't belong. So, what do you think? Was justice served, or was it a spectacle? When does a word become a contract or a weapon? Have you ever been told you were less than because of what you drive, where you live, or how you look? Drop a comment. Tell me a story. Pick a side, argue about the law, or tell me how you'd have handled it. If this hit you, like, share, subscribe. And if you've ever been written off as junk, say so out loud, because silence is what people with power count on, and speaking is how we change the score.